Welcome to another episode of Being Spiritual Are You with Chaplains Scott and Matt. I'm Matt. This is Scott. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're back. New semester starting very soon, right?
Hmm.
Just a few days
Yep.
next week. So we want to welcome you back. If you're not back in the mental frame, time to get started with that.
Start working on it at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah. I enjoyed my break. A little We had a little break with the kid. My kids are still in high school and middle school, so enjoyed the holiday break. It's always a good time when you don't know what day of the week it is.
Right.
You know, yeah. What day is today? Oh yeah,
It's a little relaxing in a way. I
yeah,
think you don't have to be so rushed or hurried or
yeah,
worried about schedules and things.
yeah.
So
It's good to slow down.
yeah.
Um, Today we wanted to talk about race in the church. We have a big national holiday coming up next Monday, Martin Luther King
Yep.
Day, and then obviously February is Black History Month as well. So
Mhm.
a good topic to discuss and enter and engage with. Um, yeah, I thought we'd start maybe talking a little bit about our journeys, and then maybe some practical stuff. We obviously are two white men. We're hoping soon to have a black woman on with us to kind of share some insights. I think it's always helpful that we posture ourselves as learners and listeners. But I know for me, growing up, race in the church wasn't ever talked about. Uh, I think growing up, definitely my family, we would have considered ourselves as not racist. Although in hindsight, we were definitely racist at times. And so I think for me, as I got older and kind of began to become more aware of my racism, I think you start to peel back the layers, and we there's a good book out there called How to Be an Anti-Racist,
Mhm.
and to be actively opposing your racism and dealing with your racism in your heart. Um, and so I went on that journey. It definitely started when I was in seminary because that's when I became aware. I it was the first time in my life that I had majority of my friends were not white. I grew up in a very white setting where, I had one black friend growing up. Hey, I have a black friend, so I'm not racist kind of thing. Right.
Oh yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
and that diversity really opened my eyes that, wow, like the stuff I think or say is pretty offensive to different cultures. So I began to repent of that, deal with that, ask a lot of questions too of like my friends who helped me through that, and then continue to grow. I think it's going to be a lifelong journey. I think I still have a lot of work to do. I know it's something I always want on my mind, and it's nice too that I have a spouse at home that like is on this journey with me as well. So she'll at times call me out, like, "Hey, watch yourself there a little bit." And she's always right when she does that. So, um, like anything, it's a constant repentance, constant like learning and growing. So I'm on this journey. Always want to learn and grow. I'm thankful that we do have these moments in our cultural calendar to remind us of that, to help guide us to lean back in. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Um, in this idea of race in the church. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I was thinking. So I grew up. My father was United Methodist pastor and grew up in suburban Baltimore, which is a predominantly African American city, one of the predominant cities in the country. So actually, we had a lot of people of color around us, um, and just like you were saying, Matt, if somebody had asked me, are you a racist? Of course, I'm not a racist. We had for Martin Luther King Day when I was a kid in Baltimore. We would do a pulpit swap. My father would go to a predominantly black church, and that pastor would go to my father's church. And so we certainly experienced the black church and we would certainly be part of that. But it was definitely more of a sense of visiting. We were visitors and it was sort of like, oh, wow, looking at these people one Sunday a year, and never really talking to them ever and never really getting to know their context or their story. But I think my parents and a lot of other people would have most of us would have said, of course, we're not racist. Now, I've gone on a similar journey as you have, Matt, that doing a lot of anti-racism training and actually becoming a trainer in our diocese here in New Jersey. And so I've read a lot of books and done a lot of self-study. And what it comes down to is, in the end, we were talking about this earlier, that if you ever bring up any supposed criticism of white people get really defensive, get really upset. And so when we talk about white privilege, when I first heard that, I'm sure my back went up. So like, what do you mean? I'm not rich. I'm not, Ivy League, whatever. But that's not what it's talking about. And the fact that I can misunderstand what white privilege is a sign of white privilege, because I get to sit back and say, oh, I'm not, and live in denial. That's definitely an example of white privilege, I think, but we can get to that later. But it's that idea that I can be, cat coming for a visit. Going to visit.
Say hello to the cat.
That's Gus looking for attention. But yeah, he wants some pets. But yeah, I think I have to learn how I am racist from, and in a lot of the trainings I took originally. There's one program I've done called My Work to Do, and it's specifically for white people. And it's saying, don't expect Black people or people of color, Asians, whoever, to educate us about it. We need to educate ourselves and not expect them to carry that burden. So I took that one, and I've taken other courses different times, especially during COVID. It was good to be sort of forced to be online. And one of the first acronyms somebody used that I learned and I took to heart was WAIT, W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? And I was that white guy in the room who thought he understood racism and thought he understood everything. And in the first time I went through a training, I think I was raising my hand and sharing constantly in a room full of people of color and other white people, because I was the expert, This is how I think I've always thought of myself. But why am I talking made me think, you know what? It might be, I'm also an extrovert, so I do like to talk, but it might be a good time, a good chance for me to shut my mouth and listen. And if something rubs me the wrong way, or I disagree with something, to not immediately object and try to contradict somebody, but to actually sit back and ask myself, why is that possibly triggering me, and have I misunderstood something? And not just assume that I'm right and that everyone else is wrong. And that was a big learning for me, because I think it's part of white privilege. And even Christian privilege in a way. I understand the Bible. I understand theology. Nobody can tell me something, And to go back and read scripture and other things in a different way was really eye-opening. And so, yeah, that was a major learning for me, to actually be humble in a lot of ways.
I like that. Why am I talking?
Why am I talking? Because let me tell you, I realized when I started thinking about it how I would interrupt people, and I was excited, and we were agreeing. It wasn't like we were fighting. I would just want to share a story, or but in the end, it's like, do I really need to be talking right now? And that was a moment where I had to eat some humble pie, as they say.
Yeah, that's good. I think COVID was for me too. I took the opportunity to take lots of courses online, and a few of them were anti-racism courses, and like all the little things that you do to trigger. I think what you said is good about white people learning, because the little things, a person of color may not know to share with you, those little things. But if they heard it like in a class, they'd be like, oh yeah, that does annoy me, or that does offend me. And so I think it's important that we as white people do lean into that. I think that helped me grow the most, is like learning all these little things, that these micro triggers that I didn't know I was doing, that I was still doing, even though I was trying to actively be anti-racist, as much as I could. And so I think that those things are helpful to continually learn and unlearn the way we act, because there is white privilege. We think that things should be done the way the white culture, and everyone should assimilate to our white culture. And if we truly are a welcoming community, a truly diverse community, we shouldn't require everyone to assimilate to one culture, right? We should be welcoming of all different cultures. I think that's important too, is to grow in that. And we see that, I think, today, dramatically with Christian nationalism. It's very much a racist thing, that we want everyone to assimilate to our culture too. And the only reason they're able to say that is because they have white privilege, right? Because they know that they're the predominant, race here in America, and so they can get away with these things. And it's sad to watch. And so they vote for a guy like Donald Trump, who empowers them and empowers them to continue these racist ways. And so, I think we've taken a step back in our society, since Trump came in power in 2016, in this way, because now, like, a lot of companies are getting rid of like the DEI stuff. I think Trump's going to try his hardest to make it illegal. I think he's going to, want companies to not be, diverse, and that'll be okay.
There's been a lot of pushback.
Sad to watch. Yeah.
There's a lot of pushback, and of course now any sort of anti-racist, curriculum or anything like that you try to teach, like in a public school, gets labeled and gets made into some great, boogeyman that somehow this is going to destroy America. If you're teaching something other than the received knowledge of, basically, like you were saying, of white supremacy and white nationalism, that, white people are in charge and that's the way God wants it. And that's basically how I was raised. They may not have said it in such words, but the idea of European or European centrism, Eurocentrism, and basically tacit white centrism at that point is absolutely what it infuriates people when you stop them from what they've always assumed to be right.
Yeah. I don't. If we're in a posture of learning, the school thing is fascinating too. Yeah, I have kids in the school system, and that, when I first was going to orientation, that was a big question: is, are you going to teach critical race theory? And this boogeyman, which means, are you going to teach that the white way isn't the only way, or the right way, whatever? And of course, they're going to still get white history. They're still going to get all of that, but like, all you're saying when you say, critical race theory is, why don't we teach other cultures? Like, I never heard of the Tulsa massacre until like 2 years ago, when I was in Tulsa and a friend of mine took me to the museum. I was like, holy cow, this happened. Like, and not that long ago in the grand scheme of our lives, we're, living today. And that was not in my curriculum at all in my world history or American history class. And so a lot of our history has been whitewashed. And so people push back. Well, I don't want you to teach my kids about the Tulsa massacre. Well, why is that? Well, because white people came in and massacred a bunch of black people, and we don't want that as part of our history. And so, I think, I don't know, like in education, I don't know why you wouldn't be open to learning, and so it confuses me.
Well, I think, just like I was saying, I think it scares some people because they recognize, if we start to look at our educational system and young people start to learn a different narrative, not necessarily an opposite narrative, but a different, more elaborated, a lot more about history, then maybe white men won't be in charge anymore. And so they call people who get, a job, who are a person of color or a woman, a DEI hire, or, they try to minimize and ridicule anybody who opposes basically white male power at this point in leadership. And so that's, you could just see it. It's so obvious. It's almost laughable, if it wasn't horrifying, that this is what threatens them. And they just don't like the idea that men aren't in charge, and white men, Christian white men.
Yeah, well,
straight Christian white men.
supposed Christian white men.
Right, exactly. So, but I think it's very threatening, and people, especially white men, are feeling threatened by it.
Yeah.
And But yeah, if you start to tell a different story, I went to seminary with basically Southern apologists, slavery apologists. They talk about the South. I mean, this was just 20 years ago. A seminary classmate telling me that slavery wasn't that bad. I mean, they were cared for, they were fed, slaves were housed. It was really, they didn't oppose that. It was only the white abolitionists that were causing the problem. This is Southern revisionism. This is, but these people are clergy. So
this is coming back, by the way.
oh, it never really went away, but yeah, definitely. Yeah. We're hearing this. People feel empowered by people like Trump and others that they can suddenly start to believe and openly believe such things. They may have never stopped believing it, but they kept quiet about
it. I opened Twitter today, or X, whatever it's called now, and the first thing I said, because the algorithm is trying to get you angry, right?
Right.
And I don't know why I opened it, but yeah, first thing I read was we need to bring back the statues of Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. They were good Christian men to be emulated. Right. I'm like, holy cow.
Well, that's,
we're back there.
The defense secretary or whatever, this guy that was being interviewed yesterday, or, in front of he was being reviewed by a Senate panel. That's one of his tasks, one of his jobs, assigned jobs, is he's going to restore all those statues that were taken down.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that. Maybe
that's part of his.
But then I clicked on it. I clicked on the thread, and this guy, he's a pastor. He had developed curriculum on studying Southern Civil War generals. Stonewall Jackson be the premier example of a godly man. Mm. And he's implementing this in his church. And I'm in America today. And I'm like, wow. Yeah.
No, it's basically, it's old. I mean, this is nothing new. It's just coming back and it's being more public.
Yeah, more out there in the
and people just aren't hesitant to share such things.
Yeah, so and Trump has empowered them. I mean,
they feel like that they're in control again, which they were never really out of control. But just to threaten to even question their control feels like that they're losing.
And then we bring anything up, right? Like if I didn't comment on that guy's post because I know exactly where to go.
It's bait.
It's just like, clickbait. You're woke. You got pronouns in your bio.
Right.
You're a Jesus. The new one was a Jesus juker. You're a Jesus juker. You're trying to
juker.
You're trying to juke me with Jesus. Like if you bring up Jesus to these folks, that's the other thing. Is like Jesus is like the premier anti-racist, right?
Right.
And if you
we would say that,
but I think they agree because I've brought Jesus up to some of these folks, and then there's a term if you go on Twitter and search it up, Jesus juker. It's used a lot, like when
I've never heard it, but that's
when they get stuck in a corner,
right?
They're like, oh, you're just a Jesus juker, just using Jesus to get me not to believe what I believe, kind of thing. I'm like, holy cow! Maybe you should reflect upon that.
Right? Yeah. Maybe you're onto something there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we this is such a big topic, and we were talking about this earlier. We're going to have to really probably spend a lot of time to just reflect, and maybe not talk about this all the time, but revisit this topic because there's just a lot that could be said. And God help us, we don't know what the future holds, and God knows, we don't. And who knows what we'll be talking about in the future, but. This is it's important for us to recognize, again, like we said, where we've come from, and we both shared a bit of our story. And if you want to open the comment section, you can certainly share some of your story if you want. But just talk about where you come from, but also, those moments where you recognize that maybe you were actually wrong about something. Mm. That's, like I said, it's pretty humbling. And to then again, just especially for white people, to listen to people of other races, ask somebody who's Asian, if you remember at the beginning of COVID, the attacks on Asians that happened because it was considered the Chinese flu or whatever.
Yeah.
People who weren't even Chinese were being attacked because they were Asian. So therefore all Asian people are Chinese in some people's minds. Talk to somebody about the internment camps of the Japanese in this country during the war, that they were rounded up and put in camps far away from the coast to keep them from potentially, causing sabotage and things. And but it was done by a progressive president, Franklin Roosevelt did that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the sins of America when it comes to racism, to indigenous peoples, the list goes on. There's so much we are complicit in, especially white Christians, that we've got to acknowledge it is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And where we go from there is something we're going to have to, again, listen to the people who were harmed, and also just spend time with them, get to know them, and understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's great. I want to reiterate that just the if you're a student and you're a Rutgers student, hopefully, and your posture to learn, be a learner, right, is to be humble, to be willing to admit that you don't know something. And I think this is one of those areas that's very important to like posture yourself that way, that you just don't know everything. And so to be a learner, I think, is the first step. Yeah, as you were talking, so many other thoughts came to my mind, and we'll address some of these as the semester goes on, like how much our theology and how much we read the Bible is influenced by our race, and we think that's the right way to read it and live by it, when somebody else of a different race, a different cultural background reads it completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And how are those both right? And how do they work together? Because I think that's the beauty actually of the gospel of Jesus, is that they do work together. But we have to be willing and posture ourselves that I am not the perfect one, right? That I can learn and we all can grow together. So yeah, let's continue this conversation. Thanks, Scott. Those are great insights, and look forward to learning more.
Yeah.